you done now?
Hi, everybody. This is Bob Gale, co-creator of Back to the Future, and you're listening to Brad Gilmore.
Oh, Brad, what have you done now?
Doc! Doc! Okay, relax, Doc. It's me. It's Martin.
Oh, it can't be. Just sent you back to the future.
Yeah. Oh, I know you did send me back to the future, but I'm back. I'm back from the future.
Great Scott.
Wait a minute, Doc. Are you telling me that you built a time machine? Out of a DeLorean?
The way I see it, if you're gonna build a time machine into a car, why not do it with some style?
Whoa, this is heavy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Back to the Future, the podcast, the only podcast looking back in time at the greatest film trilogy of all time, Back to the Future. I'm your friend in time, Brad Gilmore, and welcome back to the podcast. Oh, yes. I am, again, outside of my normal podcasting studio. I don't know what's going on. But happy 2022. Happy New Year to everybody. I think I only have a couple more days to get that in before that is a passé thing. 2022 is on the rise. And we're starting back up with some more episodes here. Got some really cool guests still planned for you this season, but I wanted to do something a little bit different this week on the show. Instead of talking specifically about Back to the Future, I wanted to talk about somebody who's graced this podcast before, Christopher Lloyd. I came across this television show that involved Christopher Lloyd that I had never heard of before, and we're going to talk about that here in just a second. And today, we're actually going to be looking at the top 5 Christopher Lloyd movies not called Back to the Future Part 2, or Back to the Future Part 3. So we're going to be looking at that in a second. But as with every day, as with every week, month, and year, we unfortunately lose people close to us, friends, family, and sometimes you lose the celebrities that you've come to know and love and watched them for years and entertained by them for decades. One of those celebrities that just passed, along with Betty White of the Golden Girls and Sidney Poitier of the In the Heat of the Night fame and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. One of those guys was Bob Saget. Bob Saget tragically passed at 65 years of age, and Bob Saget, to me, was one of those staples in one's life, right? Where you always remember seeing him on television, whether it was America's Funniest Home Videos or Full House, Fuller House, his stand-up specials, his appearances on shows like Entourage and things of that nature. Bob was an incredible human being. I had the opportunity to speak with Bob about a year ago. He was doing a massive radio tour for a charity benefiting a disease in which his sister passed from. Now, his sister passed away from it years ago, but he was working tirelessly to promote this cause. And he spent, I think we talked for about 11, 12 minutes. And although it's not Back to the Future related, I think that Bob Saget is an icon in television, and we should treat him as such. And I thought this would be just a fun little addition to the podcast this week to remember the legend Bob Saget. I actually, in our interview, called him a legend, and because I believe he is one. I believe Bob Saget is a legend. And he even said in the podcast he still had so much more to do. And I felt that he was taken too soon at 65 years of age. But he's left an indelible legacy for himself and will always be remembered for his unique ability to make people smile, make people laugh, and make people feel better about themselves. So here's my interview with the late, with the great, Mr. Bob Saget on Back to the Future, the podcast. And he joins me now to talk cool comedy, hot cuisine, the one and only, I say the legendary Bob Saget. Bob, how you doing?
Oh, thank you, Brad. I'm honored. So he's quite great, and he's part of an event that I'm doing, and so is Jeff Ross, a live event that I'm doing on Sunday and your Central Time, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was scheduled to be in Houston, too. I would have been there already, and we had to cancel because of restrictions, and so I couldn't do it, but I can't wait. I've already rescheduled for next year to come back and at the Improv there, and that's the plan, and I can't wait till we can live again, and we will. But in the meantime, I've always done these events for scleroderma, which is a disease of hardening of the skin, and I lost my sister to scleroderma in 1994. But I was hosting events before she even was diagnosed, and Robin Williams, over 30 years ago, was the first person to ever perform at the event and did 6 more after that over the 20-year period. And we are a comedy event because it's such a horrific disease, and it affects people's how they look, of course, because the skin gets very taut. And you can get Raynaud's arthritis, or it can go and affect your lungs. Not unlike COVID, you can die of pulmonary hypertension. So there are hundreds of thousands of people with this disease. And we finally are doing a global one. We are doing one. We always do them, the events are, for example, in L.A., we did one a year and a half ago, and the comedians and performers were John Mayer was on stage with Dave Chappelle and Ken Jeong and John Stamos. And in New York, I had Michael Che and Andy Cohen and John Oliver. And so this is a live on YouTube event with Susan Feniger, who was our top chef, always has cooked for the events because she was friends with our founder 35 years ago. They went to college, Sharon Monsky. And so we're going to be live in studio. And so that will be 6 o'clock live on YouTube, and 6 o'clock, 5:30 is the pre-show. And people can see all these amazing comedians and musicians, and I'll tell who as I wrap through my my riff on what I want people to know about. They can go to srfcure.org, Scleroderma Research Foundation. It's srfcure.org. And right now, if they type in the promo code Bob, there's a $50 ticket, which is it's pretty unusual that we do that, but we've never had a live virtual event, and we'll be COVID tested, and we'll be live in studio, Susan and I. And the performances of people appearing are Jason Alexander, whose stepsister passed away from scleroderma, and Jack Black, who's come to our events, and Reggie Brown and Bill Burr, who will tear me apart. That's what he likes to do. And he'll probably say, please cure this disease because I can't talk to you anymore. And Kelly Clarkson is singing a song for us that's amazing. And Jim Gaffigan, Jeff Garland, Nikki Glazer, who's hilarious, Regina Hall, who's a wonderful actress, and her mother has scleroderma, and we sent her to the center that we fund at Johns Hopkins, and her mother is well now. So that's the difference between when my sister passed away and where the new technologies and different medications that are available and just therapies. Ken Jeong, who thinks he's a doctor, will be there, and Queen Latifah, who made a video for us. Her mom sadly passed away 2 years ago from it. And George Lopez, Howie Mandel, John Mayer's going to sing, and we have an auction item of a signed guitar. And Joel McHale and he's going to, of course, rip me apart, but also we have an auction item of drinking tequila shots with some lucky winner. We're just going to get hammered. I just said, Joel, you want to drink tequila shots for a Zoom person that will bid high money? And he goes, we drink tequila? I went, yeah. He says, I'm in.
Easy sell on
Everybody's
that
drinking
one.
right now.
Yeah.
And Pat Monahan from Train, I'm almost done. Ray Romano, Jeff Ross, Sarah Silverman, and John Stamos, whose auction item is amazing when he reads stories to little kids. But I think it's story time with John Stamos, with Uncle Jesse, and I think it's going to end up being just adults calling up men or women. Oh, my God, read to me 60 Shades of Grey. I made it 30 Shades of Grey, so it wasn't as dirty. But it's a wonderful event, and it's this Sunday, the 18th, at 6 o'clock live in Houston. And it starts 5:30 with the pre-show. And srfcure.org, promo code Bob for the cheaper availability to see. It's really going to feel like a network show. I mean, we have Joe Gallen executive producing it with me, and he's a real pro. He produced my roast years ago, all the Rock and Roll Hall of Fames. He's quite an amazing guy.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, Bob, is about this disease. I had never heard of it up until maybe 2 or 3 months ago when I listened to you on Joe Rogan's podcast. that was the first time I'd ever even heard of this issue. And I think that you're
Isn't
really
that
championing.
amazing?
Yeah, I mean, and you're really championing the cause for it. And I think that that's great because my grandmother passed away from Parkinson's disease, and we have Michael J. Fox out there always fighting the good fight. So you're kind of the analogous situation for this one.
Yeah, and he's done amazing work, and what a hero he is, just a hero. And I've been doing benefits. I did a benefit of Parkinson's virtually, and ALS, and cancer, and, it's been amazing what we all try to do during this time, because you've got to raise money. We all, of course, are trying to raise money for COVID and for all of the things that come from the tragedy of it. And if a scleroderma or a Parkinson's patient got, had COVID, that would, especially with scleroderma and a lot of others, but scleroderma affects your lungs, and that's what you can pass away from. So there is a relation, and we want to cure these people. It's so important to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's called Cool Comedy Hot Cuisine. Make sure you go, and it's all over Bob's Twitter page and all over Instagram, stuff like that, so make sure you go check it out. But Bob, you also recently started a podcast, so you're kind of getting into my world a little bit.
I swear I'm not doing it competitively.
No, but how have you liked it? Because what I have found with a podcast or a radio show, it's the perfect excuse to talk to somebody you've always wanted to talk to. I've always wanted to talk to Bob Saget. Here's a quick personal.
That's sweet.
Here's
Thank
a quick
you.
personal story. Is when we were in school. Back in high school, the teachers would reprimand us if we used profanity, so we had to make up our own profane language. And Bob Saget was one of the words that we would say all the time.
We speak in code.
Yeah.
But it depends on who my guest is on the podcast. My 60th episode just came out, and I'm a newbie, but I love it. I've had wonderful guests. I've had, everybody from Norman Lear to Jake Tapper to Bill Maher to Dave Rubin to Regina Hall to it's been pretty great. Whoopi Goldberg and Stamos, of course, John Mayer, of course, friends of them. They're all the same people for the benefit, but these are my friends. And then I get to call people. So I call people that leave a message for me, and that's the show that's out right now, where I call people, see how they're doing through this time. And it's called Bob Saget's Here For You, and it's really been wonderful. It's doing quite well, and I love that people are loving it. I did it before quarantine started. I started doing it because I wanted to do it. And I said, I'll do this forever. If I'm directing a movie, if I'm doing a TV show, it's just a natural thing. And, of course, once quarantine started, I had the podcast radio board brought to my home, and that's how I do it. I just keep doing them all the time. And I love it. It's also good for me and good for other people because we get to have that connection, just like you get by talking to people with your show.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's great, and Zoom and the phones and social media has been great to keep up with people during this time. And I know I'm gonna keep this short, but I got one more question for you because you brought up the Comedy Store. The last thing that I did before quarantine shut down is I actually got to step on the stage of the world famous Comedy Store for an event that we did out there in L.A. And then by the time I got back home, the world had shut down and nothing was the same again. But why is that Comedy Store? When I was there, I was walking. It was the first time I was ever there, walking through the hallways, looking at the pictures, reading the names on the outside of the building. Why is that venue such a legendary spot for all comedians?
Well, I think if you watch the Comedy Store special, which I'm in on Sunday on Showtime, after you see Cool Comedy Hot Cuisine on YouTube at srfcure.org. I'm selling cars after this. But that documentary shows what it was. And Richard Pryor was in all the time. He really made it. It was Richard Pryor's club. And he didn't own it. Mitzi Shore owned it. But that's where I went on stage when I was 21, and I was asked to be a regular. And here I am on a lineup. Letterman's one of my first hosts. And the lineup's Michael Keaton, Billy Crystal, Jay Leno, and then Richard Pryor goes on. So I went, I think I'm going to stay here. And I was there for 8 years trying to get good, and I learned quite a bit. It was a pretty special place. I'm glad you got to experience it.
Yeah. I felt the history in the room. Sometimes you step inside of a room and you can feel that history, and you definitely feel it in the
Comedy Store. They never painted it. They never vacuumed.
Yeah, it doesn't look like they've cleaned it.
I hate to tell you this, but I have to go. I feel terrible. I have to leave because I'm on a satellite tour.
Yeah, we're wrapping up now. Let the people know one more time. What's the link?
The link is srfcure.org. Thank you so much. And they can type in the promo code BOB, B-O-B, and they'll get a $50 ticket. And it goes all the way up to 20 grand, whatever. But I mean, whatever people can give, and they can watch the show. They'll get an email right back, and they'll be able to watch it this Sunday. And so I'm pretty excited about it. And it's the 18th, and it'll be on at 6 o'clock your time in Houston. And then it'll be on at 5:30 with the pre-show. So lots of great stars, and it's a totally entertaining show with not a bunch of Zoom people that you can't keep. You lose the signal. So thanks so much for letting me plug it so much. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Much.
Thank you so much, Bob. We'll talk soon. That is Bob Saget, everybody.
I look forward to it. Boy, do I look forward to it.
So that was my conversation with the legend. Again, legends never die, Bob Saget. Just wanted to share that with you all. And I still say you go support his charity, support his cause. There are people out there suffering from this, similar to how we support Michael J. Fox and Parkinson's research and a cure from Parkinson's. Let's help Bob Saget's legacy live on by supporting all of his causes that he was so passionate about. But today on the show, I told you, I wanted to talk about Chris Lloyd, and I wanted to talk about my 5 favorite Chris Lloyd movies not named Back to the Future of any kind. This idea came to me because I was actually, the other night, my fiance and I were trying to find something to watch, and we watched Baywatch. Okay, now I'm a product of the 90s, and I was definitely keenly aware of Baywatch for one reason or another. But we watched this show, and it's absolutely, completely ridiculous. I don't know if there's any Baywatch fans out here right now, but the show is incredibly cheesy. It's everything that you think it is. It's really just reasons for pretty people to be in very revealing outfits, running on a beach in slow motion. The stories are very nonsensical, but whatever. We enjoyed watching it. It was funny. And so I was online the following day, just as I do with everything, looking up things about the show and the cast and this, that, and the other. And I remember Pamela Anderson was in another television show I thought called VIP. And I was like, I wonder if that show was bad too. Now, of course, Pamela Anderson, one of the great beauties of all time. So I wanted to go see this VIP show. So I go to Amazon, I type in VIP, and nothing came up but this show that I had never heard of called Stacked. Okay, I wonder why it was called Stacked. Came up starring Pamela Anderson. I said, what is Stacked? And I'm somebody who I think I remember certain shows. Like I even remember the Geico Insurance Cavemen had their own sitcom in the 2000s, right? So I thought I would have remembered this show. So I look into Stacked, and I'm looking at the cast list, and it says Pamela Anderson, such and such, such and such, such and such, such and such, Christopher Lloyd. And I said, what? Christopher Lloyd? It must be a different Christopher Lloyd. It must be the Christopher Lloyd who produces Modern Family, right? So I go to YouTube, and I type in Stacked TV show. And there it is, a pilot where Pamela Anderson works in a bookstore. Just leave you with that. And Christopher Lloyd is a cast member on this show that ran for 2 seasons on Fox in the mid-2000s. No idea this existed. No recollection of ever hearing about this, ever. So I started watching a little Stacked just to see our old buddy Doc in a different role. And then it gave me the idea. What are my favorite Christopher Lloyd films? Because I've always said, and I even told him, he's my favorite actor. And he's been in so much. This guy's IMDb page is ridiculous. And so I went to go look at what would be my 5 favorite Chris Lloyd films. And I thought this would be great to do on the podcast. So I started researching. And I thought I've compiled my list of the top 5 Chris Lloyd films not named Back to the Future. I thought I'd start, though, with a couple honorable mentions. So here's how it's going to work. I'm going to kind of play the trailer of the film, and then we'll talk about it here briefly and talk about some of the other actors in it and why I feel like this was a good Christopher Lloyd film and why it made the spot it did on my list. So let me start with my first honorable mention. This was a movie that was shown to me by my sister. And this movie is probably well known by most Back to the Future fans. This is an honorable mention for the best Christopher Lloyd films not named Back to the Future. Let's check it out.
He's smart.
Dennis Wozniak, Binary Pines Computer Camp.
He's tough.
Dad was right, Major Saget. I am scum.
He's slim.
Diets don't work. Chocolate cake works.
He's weird. He's a camp counselor who's about to give these kids the greatest summer vacation any kid ever had.
He's my role model.
Let's sweat!
It's brilliant. It's deranged. Attack!
It's funny, rates the New York Times.
Dennis, what happened?
Complimentary hot wax.
Get ready for sheer high spirits, says the LA Daily News.
Don't worry, Mom.
Wait, we won't be playing with cats or sparklers.
And New York Newsday calls it tailor-made for Christopher Lloyd's campy comedy style.
Thank you very much.
It's the wildest, wackiest,
We're not complete launch.
most outrageous comedy of the year.
The games begin!
Camp Nowhere.
Way cool.
Camp Nowhere. Yes, I mean, to me, this was such a 90s movie in all the best ways. Camp Nowhere came out, I believe, in 1994. It currently holds a whopping 18% on Rotten Tomatoes, if that's a metric that you go by. But I just remember watching this movie and really wishing that I was a part of this camp. Okay, it had some memorable people in it for one reason or another, but I think that the cast that stuck out to me, the cast member that stuck out to me, was Lieutenant Elliot Hendricks, who was played by none other than Thomas F. Wilson. This sometimes happens where I'm assuming somebody has the idea of, oh, hey, what if we had what if this was an opportunity to like reunite, right? Like a Back to the Future reunion. They did this in Spin City. There was just a Leah Thompson, Chris Lloyd movie that came out. So this happens, right? This definitely happens. And I thought that this movie was fun. It had some interesting people in it, including, though, according to Wikipedia, here is some of the cast list, and let's see if anybody else stands out to us. Andrew Keegan, Jonathan Jackson, Melody Kay, Thomas F. Wilson, of course, Allison Mack, who went on to be in Smallville, and then had some other issues, but this is another one that stood out to me. Jessica Alba. Ugh. Jessica Alba, man. She was 13 in this movie. And boy, was a young me infatuated. Then I grew up, saw her in Fantastic Four, and boy, was a young me infatuated. Honey? Do we remember Honey? I'm sorry, let me not be weird. But Camp Nowhere is an honorable mention for me. If you've never seen this movie, really fun. It's a turn your brain off type film where Chris Lloyd is a camp counselor where there are literally no rules and there's all sort of debauchery going on. Really, really fun movie. And that is an honorable mention for a top 5 Chris Lloyd movie not named Back to the Future. I have one more honorable mention till we get to our top 5. Our next honorable mention is thus.
Dad, when are we gonna be a family again?
A boy searching for a future.
I'd say when the Angels win the pennant.
And Williams and Norton collide, and the catch is blown.
A coach running from his past.
Are you cracking up, or is this a repeat of Cincinnati?
No, it's nothing like that.
And a team that's their only prayer.
There's a thing called talent. They don't have it.
God, if there is a God, maybe you could help him win a little. I'd really, really like a family.
Williams makes a miraculous catch.
Holy cow! came out of the sky and they picked up Ed Williams.
Great. A psycho kid. Oh, please, don't bring Great. No. Just call me Al. No one can see me or hear me but you.
Do you believe in angels?
Yes! That must have been those chili dogs I ate before the game.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
You really do see something, don't you? Yeah! Make some kind of signal.
I'll go like that, okay? Here we go again.
That's the game.
You believe there's real angels?
I know it sounds crazy.
I'm relieving you of your management responsibilities.
Somewhere between losing hope
You can't go through life thinking everyone you meet will one day let you down.
and finding the courage.
You can call it angels.
I won't play for anyone but George Knox.
You can call it faith.
That goes for me, too.
You can call it whatever you like.
They gave the world something to believe in.
I got nothing left.
You got an angel with you right now.
Danny Glover, Tony Danza,
Even though you can't see us,
and Christopher Lloyd.
Always watching.
Disney's Angels in the Outfield.
Angels in the Outfield. Again, another one of those movies that came in the white shell VHSs from Disney that I could not watch enough. If you don't know, Angels in the Outfield is about a young foster child who loves to, I think doesn't he sneak into the California Angels games back when they were the California Angels, before they were the Anaheim Angels, and now they're the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, I believe. But this movie, so he sneaks in and he ends up seeing a group of angels that help the team win, and they then think that he's a kind of good luck, right? They see him as good luck, so they keep him around, and he's a part of the team. This foster kid's a part of the team. Great cast: Danny Glover, Joseph Gordon-Levitt as a young kid. Of course, Tony Danza's in this movie. Chris Lloyd plays one of the angels. Also in this movie, Matthew McConaughey is an outfielder for the Los Angeles Angels. Adrian Brody is in this movie. This is another 1994 Christopher Lloyd classic, which also was a remake that a lot of people don't know. This movie was a remake of a film that came out in 1951 that was also called Angels in the Outfield, and that was with Paul Douglas, was starred in that film. And this movie also spawned a couple of sequels, including Angels in the End Zone and Angels in the Infield, which I will say, I don't remember anything about either one of those movies. It is slightly more favorite in the eyes of Rotten Tomatoes. According to Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 33%. Yes, a 33% on Rotten Tomatoes. Why don't we read this is something we should do, read the critics' consensus on these movies while we do these. So here is Angels in the Outfield, critical consensus according to Rotten Tomatoes. And here it is. This consensus is: a queasy mishmash of poignant drama and slapstick fantasy, Angels in the Outfield strikes out as a worthy family entertainment. God, that is cold-blooded. Cold-blooded for Angels in the Outfield. I always really liked it. I'm going to say Gene Siskel said, see Little Big League instead. Boy, were they just eviscerating this movie. Eviscerating. No one gave it a great score. Fred Topol of About.com said, terrible fantasy, full of depressing things like orphan and death. No amount of angels can uplift that. Stephen Holden of the New York Times, the movie is essentially a series of gags held together by sugar filling. Golly, they were rough on my favorite, Angels in the Outfield, but nevertheless, another 1994 Chris Lloyd film that I recommend if you want to have some silly fun where you don't think about stuff like orphans and death. But those are my honorable mentions. So now it is time to get to number 5 on my list. Number 5 on my list is a movie that I think that probably no one on here would have guessed would have been in the top 5 Chris Lloyd movies. But it is a movie that came out in 1978, before Back to the Future. And this movie I actually bought on one of those Columbia House things. Hey, you can get 20 movies for 25 cents or whatever. My sister got me into those, and I got it on there. And this is fun for a couple reasons. I actually talked to Chris Lloyd about this movie, but it was directed by Jack Nicholson, starring Mary Steenburgen, Christopher Lloyd, John Belushi, and Jack Nicholson. This is 1978's Going South.
Now, why would the prettiest gal in Longhorn, Texas, want to marry a no-good horse thief like Moon?
Get in there and have a good time. Act foolish.
You heard about them matches made in heaven, didn't you? Well, I'll bid one of them.
Damn it all, you stole my girl!
Mr. Moon. Will I take the reins, dear?
The more Moon sees of his bride, the more he's itching for a real honeymoon.
In my time, I have put a gal or two in tune with nature.
I'm sure nature is very great.
But every night, he ends up sleeping in the barn. And every day, he works like a mule.
Get to work.
Rather laugh.
That's all you like to do.
No, that ain't all I like to do.
What are you doing down there? You got me drunk. I don't remember a thing.
I didn't get you drunk.
Wait a minute. You get your clothes and you get out of here. Hold it. That's enough. Don't shoot. Vamoose.
If I was monkeying around, would I still have my clothes on?
Mr. Moon, are you going to rob this stage or not?
He's just trying to impress me.
Jack Nicholson is Going South.
I've told y'all before, I have an affinity for Western films. I don't know if it's because I grew up in Texas, but I really do love Westerns. And I think that this is a really fun Western, and it's interesting just the cast put together. Again, John Belushi, Chris Lloyd, Mary Steenburgen and Chris Lloyd in a Western before Back to the Future 3. And Jack Nicholson directing and starring. If you've never seen this movie, I definitely think that you should go out and watch it. It was not a hit back in the 70s with audiences. I don't think that it did a whole hell of a lot of business. It did $7.5 million at the box office, which was even in 1978, isn't phenomenal. However, of the 3 Chris Lloyd movies I've mentioned thus far, has the best tomato meter score of 73% on Rotten Tomatoes. And let's see if we can read a review of Going South and see what the critics said. This is from Mariana Hirsch, who said a lovingly produced parody of a all shoot 'em up or tight-lipped Western men fluttering Western women. Okay, I guess that's a positive review. Jack Nicholson is hilarious in this underrated comedy Western. Nicholson's second film as a director is a wonderfully beguiling Western. Going South is a gritty Western with plenty of spunk, an enjoyable offbeat Western. Only one rotten review so far, a waste of time, one to avoid, especially if you're a fan of the frequently spectacular Jack Nicholson. Those are all reviews that were written after the movie came out, several years after, in the mid-2000s. This is one that if you like Westerns, you're a fan of Jack Nicholson, his charm and charisma get you way, way, way far into this movie. And it's cool to see Chris Lloyd positioned as a bad guy, which he actually is more frequently than not and may continue to be on this list. But that is my number 5 Chris Lloyd movie, not named, Back to the Future. Now it is time for number 4.
When we first met years ago, it was an evening much like this. Magic in the air. A boy.
A girl.
An open grave.
You were so beautiful, pale and mysterious. No one even looked at the corpse.
Wednesday, play with your food.
Is this made from real lemons? Yes. I'll buy a cup if you buy a box of my delicious Girl Scout cookies. Are they made from real Girl Scouts?
Thing, you're a handful. I've done this before.
This holiday season, they'll make you feel right at home.
Last night, you were like some desperate howling demon. You frightened me. Do it again.
The Addams Family. Sorry, but you'll have to wait until November 22nd.
The Addams Family, of course, based off the television series, which was my mother was a fan of back in the day, is such a fun watch. 1991, Chris Lloyd. This is the year after Back to the Future 3. He plays Fester Addams. This is of course, Barry Sonnenfeld film. Barry Sonnenfeld did a myriad of different movies. If you go look up some of his films, it's Addams Family, For the Love of Money, Addams Family Values, Get Shorty, Men in Black, Wild Wild West, Big Trouble, Men in Black 2, RV, Men in Black 3, and 9 Lives is his directorial filmography. So this was a big movie for him because this was his directorial debut, and it had such a interesting style to it. Even with Cousin Ed and Thing running around. Of course, the film itself had a packed cast of all kinds of people that you know, starting with Angelica Houston as Morticia Addams, Raul Julia as Gomez Addams, rest in peace. Christopher Lloyd, of course, plays Uncle Fester and Gordon Craven. Christina Ricci's in this movie. The list goes on and on of people that you will know, especially of the time back in the day. This film really captures the essence of the Addams Family, I think, even better than the original television series did. If you look back at the comic strip series, which was started, where all this came from newspaper comics, this really felt like the Addams Family come to life. And Angelica Houston as Morticia Addams is a particular highlight. Christina Ricci as Wednesday is a particular highlight. And Christopher Lloyd essentially plays a bad guy for the majority of this film as Gordon Craven, who he and his mother are trying to hatch a plan to steal the Addams Family gold because their Addams lawyers figure out, or his lawyer figures out, that there's a stash of gold down there. And Christopher Lloyd pretends to be Fester Addams and then finds out that he actually is Fester Addams. Really interesting movie. Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 65%. The audience gave it 66%, so they're about on par here. For an hour 40, I think it's a fun watch. The critics' consensus is this movie is peppered with amusing sight gags and one-liners, but the disjointed script doesn't cohere into a successful whole. That is a positive review, by the way, of the film. It doesn't sound like it, but I guess 65%, you're almost got a D if you're in school and 6% away from an F. So Addams Family and Addams Family Values, both good, but Addams Family makes number 4 on my favorite non-Back to the Future Christopher Lloyd films. Now for number 3.
20th Century Fox invites you on the adventure of a lifetime in the most magical film of 1994. Richard Tyler is about to take an incredible journey. the storm and into a world where imagination runs wild. This is only the beginning. Macaulay Culkin, the Page Master. All the adventure your imagination can hold.
Now, maybe not all of you know The Page Master, but The Page Master was a film that, again, my sister put me on game to back in the day, and it was one of the movies that would combine live action and animated animation. Live action animation. This is 1994, and this is coming off of Home Alone 2 from Macaulay Culkin. So you have to imagine, at the time, Macaulay Culkin is the biggest child actor in the world. And after Home Alone, which was the most popular movie of 1990, he's one of the biggest stars in the world. And here he is in this film where he plays Richard Tyler, which is a young boy who's afraid of everything. And his dad sends him down to the hardware store because his dad's trying to make him a tree house. And he sends him down to the hardware store where there's a big storm on his way down there. So he's riding his bike and it's raining and there's a storm. So he slides into the library to stay dry. And he meets the librarian, whose name is Mr. Dewey. And Mr. Dewey is, of course, played by Christopher Lloyd. And Christopher Lloyd sends him down to find the phone. He wants to find a phone, so he says, the phone's down here. Follow the signs, you'll find it. During this time, Richard Tyler gets spooked. There's dripping water everywhere off his raincoat, slips, falls, hits his head, looks up at the ceiling, and then all of a sudden the ceiling starts to melt and turn into animated water, and he gets swept up in this library where he becomes now a animated figure and starts interacting with different characters from well-known novels. Again, you have the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland. You had, I think, Gulliver's Travels are in there at some point. There's Long John Silver. There's Captain Ahab with Moby Dick. There's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It goes on and on and on. And the three books that he becomes friends with are horror, played by Frank Welker, fantasy, which is played by Whoopi Goldberg, adventure, played by Patrick Stewart, and they're trying to find the keeper of the books and the guardian of the written word, a man called the Page Master, which will help show him to the exit sign so he can get back home. I really, really like this movie. Again, it was a constant for me back in the day. This movie has a 21% on Rotten Tomatoes, 48% audience score. That's based off 50,000 ratings. Let's read a couple of the reviews for The Page Master. Obviously, I don't have the best Rotten Tomatoes taste. I think every movie I've picked except for Addams Family has been negatively reviewed. This is from Christy Lemire from ChristyLemire.com. Said The Page Master is the kind of movie first grade teachers would have popped into the VCR in the 1990s to kill time on a rainy afternoon. That is not a negative review, by the way. It is listed as negative or rotten. That is a positive review of my book. Weak Macaulay Culkin fantasy with some cartoon violence, says Alex Orner of Common Sense Media. And then here's a positive review from Sergio Benitez, who says, narrated with a rhythm that prevents that one could get bored, the moral of The Page Master, which involves the power of the books and reading. Look at that. So look, some positive reviews there. Top critics. Let's go to top critics. Run. So, Roger Ebert said a sad and dreary film. Well, there you go. That's from the Chicago Sun-Times. Rest in peace to the GOAT of movie reviews. This is one that I think that especially if you have young kids, it's a fun watch. I showed it to my nephews after we went through our Back to the Future watch, and I was just showing them things that I liked. I think this is a good one. This is a good one. Now, I know the film did have some issues. There was a legal arbitration with the Writers Guild of America when his producer, David Kirshner, attempted to claim sole authorship of the screenplay and original story with no credit to the original screenwriter, David Cassie. Well, that's just wrong. That is just wrong. The movie came out distributed by 20th Century Fox, had a budget of $34 million and only made $13 million in North America. So it lost money. Definitely lost money over the Thanksgiving holiday, which not expected for a Macaulay Culkin film. But I like it. Also, there's a video game of it, and I think Macaulay Culkin plays it on his YouTube channel. It is the most impossible video game you ever play, but it's a favorite of mine, and that's why it lands number 3 on my list of Christopher Lloyd movies not named Back to the Future. Are you ready for the top 2? Now, I think a lot of you have been listening to this podcast, and you have been thinking, you know what? I know what number 1 is. It's obvious what number 1 is. But is it? And what is number 2? Out of all the movies this legendary actor has done, including our favorite trilogy of all time, what could we come up with that would be the top 2 movies in his filmography that are not Back to the Future? Number 2 involves somebody from Back to the Future also, who is not Christopher Lloyd. Here is number 2 on the list.
Mommy's going to the beauty parlor, darling. But I'm leaving you with your favorite friend, Roger. He's going to take very, very good care of you. Because if he doesn't, he's going back to the science lab.
Cut! What the hell was wrong with that take? Nothing with you, baby Herman. You were great. You were perfect. You were better than perfect. This Roger, he keeps blowing his lines. Roger, what's this? A tweeting bird? Tweeting bird? Roger, read the script. Look what it says. It says rabbit gets clunked. Rabbit sees stars, not birds. Stars! Can we lose the playback, please? You're killing me. For crying out loud, Roger. How the hell many times do we have to do this damn scene? Raoul, I'll be in my trailer. Taking a nap! Excuse me,
Please, Raoul, I can give you stars. Just drop the refrigerator in my head one more time.
Roger, I got on your head 23 times already.
I can take it. Don't worry about me.
I'm not worried about you. I'm worried about the refrigerator.
This is the tale of an up-and-coming movie star named Roger Rabbit and a down-and-out private detective named Eddie Valiant.
Ooga booga!
Every moment they were together was a new adventure in trouble.
Find me, Eddie. Please.
It's a motion picture about friendship.
I get easy, will ya? Please, Eddie. Don't tell me out. You're making a big mistake.
Love. Compassion.
Well, I'm sorry I yanked your ears.
All the time you yanked my ears?
Murder.
Marvin Acme. The rabbit cacked him last night.
Remember, you never saw me.
Sex.
I'd do anything for my husband, Mr. Valiant. Anything.
And violence.
Tunes gets him every time.
You wouldn't have any idea where the rabbit might be?
Got a thing for rabbits, huh? The whole thing stinks like yesterday's diapers.
It's a comedy a little different from all the rest.
I'm a pig. I'm a tune.
I'm not bad. I'm just drawn that way.
But tell me, Eddie, is that a rabbit in your pocket or are you just happy to see me?
Touchstone Pictures and Steven Spielberg present a Robert Zemeckis film.
We tunes may act idiotic, but we're not stupid.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
I'm sure many of you thought this was going to be number 1, and boy, was it hard to come down with these final 2. because I love both of these movies so much. Who Framed Roger Rabbit is an exceptional piece of film. I think that it holds up to this day. There is no doubt about this movie. Whereas The Page Master or The Addams Family or Angels in the Outfield or Camp Nowhere or Going West, these are all movies that sure, maybe you could have a certain point of view about its quality, but I've loved them all. This is, I think, the first entry on the list that is completely undeniable. It's undeniable how great this movie is. This movie came out in 1988, but came out between Back to the Future and Back to the Future. It came out the year before Back to the Future 2. So between Back to the Future and Back to the Future 2 and 3, of course. This was another Robert Zemeckis movie. How they pulled this movie off, I still do not know. Who Framed Roger Rabbit is a triumph in film. It is a triumph in animation. Is it a triumph in acting? It's a triumph in technical ability. It was nominated for several Academy Awards. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Academy Awards. Won 4 of them, including for Best Film Editing, Best Sound Effects Editing, Best Visual Effects, and a Special Achievement Award. It was also nominated for Best Cinematography for Dean Cundey from Back to the Future fame, of course. Best Art Direction, and Best Sound overall. This movie was a monster. It was a hit amongst critics. It was a hit amongst fans and audiences. In 2019, CNN did a miniseries called The Movies, and Tom Hanks called this movie the most complicated movie ever made. And if you ever watch anything behind the scenes, it feels like it is. It is so complex, but working with live action and animation at the same time. You know, that had been done before, but not to an extent like this, where you had a feature-length film that did it so effortlessly. You have Bob Hoskins as Eddie Valiant, who's the private eye. Christopher Lloyd plays Judge Doom, of course. And Charles Fleischer, who also is in Back to the Future 2, plays Roger Rabbit, Benny the Cab, Greasy, and Psycho, but obviously most known for Roger Rabbit. Kathleen Turner, who Robert Zemeckis worked with in Romancing the Stone, plays Jessica Rabbit. And come on, man. I know it's a cartoon, but Jessica Rabbit is like one of the, or what would you call her, a smoke show? Would that be like the appropriate term for a cartoon? But sultry, definitely something that every lady looks to dress up as for Halloween. Jessica Rabbit is still a staple today. It says, though, interestingly enough, that Kathleen Turner was uncredited in the movie. I wonder why that was. Huh. Amy Irving played Jessica's singing voice, and Betsy Brantley was Jessica Rabbit's performance model. So those are just interesting things for you. Here's what I thought was really cool. Mel Blanc plays Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Porky the Pig, Tweety Bird, and Sylvester the Cat. But again, this movie has so many classic scenes, from Patty Cake to The Dip, Christopher Lloyd's reveal as he was a cartoon the whole time and talking about freeways, the Ink and Paint Club, Betty Boop being a waitress there, the scene in the club with Donald Duck and Daffy Duck, the fact that they were able to get Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny on the same screen. If you think about today's times that we live in and how IP driven everything is, and how even all the Marvel characters can appear on screens together, right? You think about that. And the fact that they were able to pull off all those IPs, Disney and Looney Tunes, Mickey and Bugs and Donald and Daffy, all in the same film, that's why it's the most complicated movie ever made. Had a $50 million budget, made $330 million at the big screen. Oh, at the box office on the big screen. June 22nd, 1988, a triumph again of film. Let's see what old Rotten Tomatoes gave it here. Who Framed Roger Rabbit has a 97% certified fresh tomato score, 85 from the audience, which is surprising to me. But the critics' consensus is Who Framed Roger Rabbit is an innovative and entertaining film that features a groundbreaking mix of live action and animation with a touching and original story to boot. That is why Who Framed Roger Rabbit will always be one of my favorite movies ever. It is why it's one of my favorite Christopher Lloyd movies ever, not named Back to the Future. And it is why it's number 2 on the list. Now, again, my number 1 and number 2 could have been interchangeable. And as many times as I've watched Who Framed Roger Rabbit, this movie, when I discovered it and watched it, which was in my early teens, took over my life for quite some time, to where I show this movie to everyone. I talk about this movie to everyone. It is one of my favorite films ever made, and it has Christopher Lloyd as a part of an ensemble cast. It is now time for the number 1 Christopher Lloyd film not named Back to the Future. Here we go.
Every person in this room has the perfect motive.
Stand back!
For murder.
What do you mean? Murder.
But only one of these suspects is the murderer. Is it the timid Mr. Green?
Why are you screaming? Because I'm frightened of what? Screaming!
Or the militant Colonel Mustard?
If I was the killer, I would kill you next.
Huh?
Said F.
Mrs. White, who helped her husband on his way?
Well, it's a matter of life after death. Now that he's dead, I have a life.
Miss Scarlet, who's helped many men along the way?
Practice makes perfect.
Professor Plum, who's looking for a way?
I'm looking.
Mrs. Peacock?
I have absolutely no idea what we're doing here, but I am determined to enjoy myself.
Or did the butler do it?
No.
Paramount Pictures invites you to an evening of mystery.
Let us in! Let us in! Let us out! Let us out!
Murder.
This is getting quite serious.
And madness. In the movie that makes a scene of the crime.
So who did it?
Clue. It's not just a game anymore.
1985's Clue the movie is the best Christopher Lloyd movie not named Back to the Future in Brad Gilmore the Boat's opinion. I discovered this movie at a local video store of all places. There was a store, and I'm sure it was a chain. I'm not 100% sure, but there was a store called Hollywood Video that was down the street from where I lived as a young man in Friendswood, Texas, right outside of Houston, Texas. And I was going through the aisles. I'd always stop off in the special interest section because that's where they had wrestling movies. And I was walking around and I saw the poster for Clue the movie. And of course, Clue is a game that we all grow up with. And we've all played, although sometimes it's confusing to play. But I've played Clue and I enjoy Clue. We have a copy of Clue in the house. It was actually the first board game I bought for my new home. Because I was like, oh, I got to have Clue. So I'd always loved the game, and I had no idea of this movie. So I watched Clue the movie for the first time, and it was on DVD, and I hit play movie. Watched it, loved it, right? Loved it. I was like, this movie is hilarious, spooky, very noir in some parts. It's a murder mystery, which for me was the plot. The plot of the murder mystery is a little hard to follow for me. But then at the reveal, I was satisfied. So I remember telling my friend about it. And I said, we got to watch this movie. You got to watch it with me. You got to watch it with me. And back then, I think you had like a 5-day rental period. So he came over on day 4 of the rental period. We watched the movie. And I'm like, you never guess the ending. You'll never guess the ending. And the ending comes. And not only was he surprised by the ending, I was surprised by the ending. It wasn't the same ending that I had seen before. I'm like, what? Wait, hold on. What is going on here? And I come to find out, after some internet research, this movie has 3 different endings. There's an A, B, and C ending. And there's a way you can watch them all together. But at the time, I was watching just a random ending every time, and I had no idea. It's become, although it wasn't initially super successful, it had a $15 million budget. It made about $15 million back at the theater. Came out December the 13th, 1985. This is after Back to the Future. And Chris Lloyd is in it and plays Professor Plum. There's also Eileen Brennan, who plays Mrs. Peacock. Colleen Camp, who plays Yvette. Tim Curry, the legend Tim Curry, who plays Wadsworth. Bill Henderson as the cop. You have Howard Hesseman as the evangelist and the chef, or the chief, excuse me. Madeline Kahn plays Mrs. White, the late great Madeline Kahn. Jeffrey Kramer is the motorist. Chris Lloyd, I said, is Professor Plum. Michael McKean is Mr. Green. Martin Mull is Colonel Mustard. You have the cook. You have Lee Ving, who's Mr. Body. Leslie Ann Warren, who plays Miss Scarlet. And Jane Wielding, who plays the singing I Am Your Singing Telegram, the singing telegram girl. This movie, so much fun if you've never seen it before. It did not fare well on Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, it's okay. It's 68% on Rotten Tomatoes, an audience score of 86%. The critics' consensus is a robust ensemble of game actors elevate Clue above its schematic source material, but this farce's reliance on novelty over organic wit makes its entertainment value a roll of the dice. I've shown this movie to my fiance and her sister. They were not as high on it as I was. I've always liked Clue the movie, and one of my favorite television shows of all time, it's actually in my top 2 or 3, between this show, Curb Your Enthusiasm, and Seinfeld, is a show called Psych. And Psych, I've talked about on here before. I actually played a little conversation I had with 2 of the stars, Dule Hill and James Roday Rodriguez, when we talked about time travel within Psych. They, for their 100th episode, did a movie, it was called 100 Clues. So they did an homage to Clue the movie, where Christopher Lloyd was in that as well as Leslie Ann Warren and Martin Mull were all in that. They parodied, or paid homage, I should say, to this movie. Fun time. If you've never seen Clue, you'll be able to watch all 3 endings, so it's a surprise every time, and a lot of fun. Now, there has been talk in recent years of remaking this movie, and this is another one that's like, I'm cool with it if they want to do it. But as of February 2020, there were still talks about reviving this. Fox was going to produce it. At one point, Gore Verbinski was going to direct the movie. Ryan Reynolds was attached to star to it. There's a lot of possibilities for the future of Clue, but this 1985 version, obviously superior film. And Christopher Lloyd has the unique distinction of playing both a doctor and a professor in 1985. And those are the top 5 Christopher Lloyd films not named. Back to the Future. Did you enjoy the list? What would be on your list? Tweet me at Brad Gilmore and tell me. Make sure you go over to Amazon or wherever you get your books and get my book, Back from the Future, a celebration of the greatest time travel story ever told. If you haven't already, my book, Bond, James Bond, exploring the shaken and stirred history of Ian Fleming's 007, is due out here next month. So much great stuff on the horizon, guys. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Make sure you rate us, review us on Apple Podcasts. Give us 5 stars, and you will get a book in the mail next. For all of you who listen, thank you very much. This is Back to the Future, the podcast. I'm your friend in time, Brad Gilmore, and I will see you in the future.
What have you done now? Oh, Brad, what have you done now?